This video is supported by Rocket Railways for all your model railway needs. Please check the link in the description below.
Hello and welcome back to Galgormhall for what is essentially a layout update. Over the winter months I've been working away at many of the scenics in around the branch area of the layout, and it was about time that I shared some of that progress. If you remember the last time I showed you the layout, I was ripping up all the WWS static grass and replacing it with green scenes, and that has moved on quite considerably since then. I've also been working an awful lot at making homemade trees using seafoam, and I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. Before I move to the actual layout itself, it's an awful lot warmer up here because one of the other jobs I did over the winter time was to insulate the loft. I've gone for the slightly less expensive foil insulation over the deep kingspan type stuff, but the changes in the temperature up here are absolutely remarkable. Right, let's move on. There's quite a bit to get through, so I hope you enjoy it and I'll catch you again at the end. Let's make a start where we last finished off with regards to layout updates essentially. If you remember, this embankment was one of the things that I had been going back and refreshing up with the new green scene static grass, and also in that video I mentioned that I wanted to replace the level crossing. I was never 100% happy with the tarmac option that I had gone for originally, and I wanted to replace it with a much more sort of traditional wood level crossing, and that's now been done. The process for that is very similar to how I carried out the wood fence staining, which I showed in a video just 2 or 3 episodes ago, in that it's still the same coffee stirrers cut into about 2mm wide strips. They were then glued onto sheets of plastic card, cut to the size, the area that was required. Once dried, then it was just a matter of layering up the paint with browns and greys, and a little touch of white in there as well, just to sort of bring out that old weathered timber look. And then there's just the final option was to add a little bit of black weathering powder across it, just to sort of denote the track marks, or the those marks that you get in the centre of the roadway. Now this area has sort of continued to be worked on. I have now put the signal box into place and it's bedded down in, and that little pathway up to the steps as well. Ernie is on hand there on the level crossing gates, waiting for the next train to pass by, ready for opening it. Incidentally, that little figure comes from Dark Castings, and it really is quite a nice little model, and I think just enhances that scene. Moving on down, still just a case of an awful lot more static grass being lifted and replaced. This entire area, which had been done before, has now been redone, and really the only difference here is what I've tried to do is include an awful lot more trees into the scene. I think it helps the look of the landscape by having lots of these trees in it. Similar to the trees down at the far end near the little shop build, the majority of these trees are all homemade using the seafoam technique, which I will come to shortly to show you how I go about that. Just to the right of your screen there is just the one example of a bot tree, and that's one of the oak trees from Primo Models. It's a very, very nice tree. They are on the pricey side, but for something as sort of an impact set, or something to set off one part of your layout, they really are worth their money. The little conifer just to the left of that oak tree is also one of their brands too. The only other trees that are maybe in this scene, which you can't really see from this, I'll show it in the next shot, are a couple of homemade ones, but using the plastic armatures that you get from the likes of Woodland Scenics. Slightly blocking the view just at the minute, but it's this large oak tree, and this is one of those Woodland Scenics armatures that I'd spoken about just previously there. Essentially, they come just as a plastic piece and you prise them out into sort of a tree shape, but what I've actually done then is added some seafoam, super glued it onto those armatures, and then followed the rest of the process like I do with the rest of the seafoam trees. what this shot also hopefully conveys is that element of the railway in the scenery as the Class 22 just passes by there. What I wanted to be able to capture some of these shots where you just catch a little glimpse of the railway in behind nature itself, and those wee shots I think are just going to be something quite special in the future. So as we pan over the top of this large oak tree, you'll be able to see where these seafoam trees are really coming into their own. It's something I had envisioned for this area, which would have been a sort of densely wooded area just sat atop that rock outcrop, which the railway cutting drives right through. Before we go any further, what I'll do now is I'll take you over to the workbench and I'll show you how I've come about making these seafoam trees. Seafoam trees, well, most of you may well know this, but for those that don't, seafoam is essentially a dried plant product, and I have got a box left over here from Gauge Master, but you can also get it from Knock and WWS and other brands too. In my personal opinion, the Gauge Master and the Knock are probably a couple of the best brands to go for. And what you essentially get is some dried tree branches essentially. Now I have very few of these left. As you can see, they've all been sort of placed well onto the layout, but they come in various sizes, and what you can do is break them down and they become very nice trees. Now one of the problems sometimes you will have with them is that they can be a little bit bent, but by applying some warm water to them, that softens the branch and then you can straighten them out. In all honesty, I haven't bothered doing that because I think sometimes the charm of a little bit of a sort of a bend to the tree is much more natural than everything being sort of rigid straight. Now once you pick out a tree that you like the look of, it's a matter of just dressing it ready for placing on the layout. So let's say take this one here, and this bendy branch is obviously far too much, so we'll take that off there and we're left with a fairly small, but you know, and actually it's quite a flat tree, which would be ideal for a back scene. It's not going to get in the way. There is maybe a little bit too much of a curve on here, but it'll do for the presentation of what I want to show you. You can see that there are little green leaves essentially, and these need to be taken away because they just look completely unsightly, so they do. And you will find that most of the branches all have these little things. They're just sort of a byproduct of whenever the plant has dried out. At this stage here, then you're pretty much ready for the application of the leaf foliage. Before you do that, you can spray the entire thing into a more uniform brown color if you wish, but I do like these lighter color branches, and I think it tends, if you look into nature, a lot of tree trunks and that tend to be more on the paler brown or even towards the greys than actually the deep browns that you would see in most, say, plastic armatures. So I'm not going to spray anything, we're just going to go straight to the leaf foliage application. And what I'm using is the G Model Scene leaf foliage range. Now Gabor has 3 colours in his range, of which I have 2 fairly well packed bags still available, and then a third one here which is in actual fact a mix of all 3 colours. You never ever throw anything away. Whenever the excess spills onto your newspaper, you can gather it up and it gives you another cluster of colour of foliage for your tree. At this stage then we're going to spray the seafoam with some spray glue. Now I am using Ultra Tape Rhino. It's an okay spray adhesive. It's an awful lot less expensive than say some of the 3M that does one, but it tends to be about £20–25 for a spray can. This tends to jet quite tightly. It doesn't give a nice fine mist spray, but once you get used to using it as an application, it becomes quite good.
and it's only $3.99 in the range too, so it's fairly inexpensive. So this Seafoam tree is going to get a spray of the adhesive, and then I can choose whichever colour I want, and it's a matter of sprinkling that leaf foliage onto the tree, shake off the excess, and that's it, it's job done. And that's our tree finished. Very simple, very quick, and once you put together a small production line, you can get an awful lot of these trees run off in a very short period of time. And by building them up in different heights and colours and shapes, you really do get the feel of a nicely dense wooded area. This is probably one of my most favourite areas that I've worked on this winter, just bringing to life what was a very sort of barren landscape with all the use of the trees, and then enhancing it all with the painting of the rock moulds. Now those wooden scenics rock moulds, I was planning to put in how I went about painting them in this video. However, it's coming in at about 10 to 15 minutes just to show you the method that I went through, and I think what I'm going to do is put it out as a separate video at a future date. So we will revisit this in a few weeks' time. There's an awful lot more to do in this area. The whole brown mound on the right hand side is going to get very much similar treatment, with a lot more trees and foliage sort of cascading down towards the railway line, and then towards the tunnel portal again there'll be some trees in that just before it breaks into a little bit of open ground up at the village area. As the cold weather really set in over the winter time, and before I'd got the insulation installed into the loft, I took a little bit of time downstairs in the kitchen where it was a little bit warmer, and I built this first in a series of builds for the village, and this is now known as Blackstone Cottages. As I said, this is the first of a number of buildings for the village, which is now going to be called Carrig Wills. I've opted for the name Carrig Wills as Carrig in Irish means rock, and it seems appropriate that this village sits on top of this rock above the tunnel. And the Wills aspect of it is that I've decided what I'm going to do is all the buildings in this area are either going to be built completely from the kits from the Wills range, or certainly using the Wills accessories to build up scratch build forms instead. So that's something hopefully to look forward to in the coming months as that little village area develops. What I will do first is I'll take the little diorama as it is away from the area there, and I'll show you in a little bit more detail. So this is Blackstone Cottages, and it's been built from the Wills kit CK21, which is the semi-detached cottages kit, and it's been very much built just according to the instructions, other than the few modifications to allow it to fit into the landscape better, hence the reason why the doors sit so high off of the ground. But what I really wanted to show, bring it down onto the counter for was so that I could show you the rear. There's very little of this is actually going to be visible whenever it's on the layout, but it was a fun project just to be able to include it in the build. As you can see there, we've got two backyards for the houses. The steps down from the doors are maybe a little bit unlikely, I'm not 100% sure, but to me it adds a little bit of additional character to it. Those there are just simply 2mm plastic card just layered up, glued into place, and then 0.5mm steel wire was used for the handrails. That was just soldered into place, and then small holes drilled into the steps and glued down in. The washing line is a Langley kit, nice little kit to work at. Perhaps the lady hanging up the washing has been working out a little bit too much. Her arms are looking a little bit buff in my opinion. On the other side we have a little wheelbarrow from, I think it's the Coopercraft range, and there's a couple of dustbins there too, and there's the obvious inclusion of a hut at the rear. Now it had to be cut slightly. It comes from the Wills Grotty Huts range, and you get three little various huts in that little set, but as I say, I needed to cut it just to allow it to fit onto the diorama base, so that whenever it butts up against the back scene it sits nice and flush. Oops, just knocked the fence off. So that is the Blackstone Cottages. As I already said, the next build will be a shop, and that is the CK18 semi-detached shops, and it will sit the other side of the road from the cottages. Now, on the subject of this shop, I had a few people comment with regards to the cottages whenever I posted it onto Facebook. Was there a video accompanying the build? I didn't do it for that one, but I would be prepared to do it for the shop kit if you felt that, you know, you would like to see how you go about building one of these kits. They are fully instructioned, but some people are maybe a little bit wary of them, because essentially it's just plain plastic sheets that you have to do a lot of work on yourself. Because I do need to make a few enhancements to allow it to fit into my scene, perhaps it would benefit to run a short video series on it. If you are interested, please leave a comment below, and I will certainly put together a video on building this particular kit. This is one of the two ends that connects each side of the layout. Trains running from left to right head from the branch right round into the station area. It had always been my intention to create some sort of river in this area, and hence the reason that there's a little gap in the wood there. That was always going to be the location of it. That kind of fell by the wayside, but it's back on the table now, and it's back on for a particular reason. I've been talking with Paul over at M Trains, or was M Trains, and it's now Gable End YouTube channel. And Paul's been doing a lot of great work with regards to using a die cutter to cut out materials for retaining walls, and more impressively some of the buildings. And as part of that project, he was building a bridge, and he got his measurements a little bit wrong. He was basically 10 mils short of what he should have been with regards to the bridge he was building. So I cheekily asked him what he was doing with the one that he did make that was of no use to him, and he very kindly sent it over to me. And it's an absolute corker, so it is. It's full of little detail, and to think that this has been built just from plain plastic card, cut out in a die cutter, and then put into place. So my intention for it is just to set it into this area here, and that will span the main line, and it will span whatever river that I'm going to, or river or canal or whatever it might be that I'm going to put in underneath. And then there'll be a single bridge just on the branch line coming up from the lower area. Now I actually have a bridge for that, and it's something that may be familiar to you if you've seen it in some of my previous videos. So let me pull that out and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Now this diorama, many of you will have seen before. I've used it to present some of the new purchases, rolling stock and locomotives that I bought for the layout, but it's beginning to get a little bit tired now. So what I was thinking was that this bridge here could be salvaged, and I think just the finish that I have on it there would accompany the new iron girder bridge quite well. So the idea will be that I'd cut out a section of the track here to be able to slot both the bridge, this double line bridge, in for the main line, and then the smaller bridge in behind for the branch. I'll need to remove this piece of baseboard here and drop it down lower, and that will give us our cutting for either a canal or a small stream or something like that. But that's one of the projects that I look to do maybe later this year. I really should stop saying I'm going to get done on this soon, because I said I was going to start the station back in January time. It's now March and we still haven't even looked at that. So no more promises, but that's one of the visions that I have for this section of the layout. Certainly once I get all the scenics done, working up towards Carrigwills, I can now move across into this area here. Okay, there we go. I hope you enjoyed me running through all the stuff that's been going on here on the layout. I did try and show as much different stuff as possible with photographs and that interjected, just to try and give some variation of shots. So I hope I've been able to convey the work that has been involved over the last couple of months.
It is one of the reasons why the station build really hasn't progressed yet, and I really do still want to get on with that. I do have one other little build project to do before I can even turn my attention to that, and to be honest, I may well just set it aside for the time being while I look at developing Carrig Wills a little bit more. That's a wee project that I'm really quite keen on advancing quite quickly. Now, it may well be a few weeks before I have another video out, as I do have that other project to do. It's not going to be videoed, and I just want to get my head down and concentrate on getting it done, but I will be back very, very soon. So thank you again for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so, and if you enjoyed what you watched this evening, give me a wee message below and let me know what you think. And until the next time, bye bye.